guys, and welcome to this session about virtual entities for F&O, where we will learn how to expand your F&O environment with Power Platform capabilities. This session is for you who's coming from the F&O side that want to extend your capabilities with Power Platform stuff, or if you're from the Power Platform side and want to kind of extend the use cases that you can use your already existing knowledge with on the F&O processes as well. My name is Ted Olson, and I'm a fast track recognized solution architect. I work within Capgemini as the CTO for the Nordic Dynamics 365 business and as principal. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I would like to walk you guys through is a little bit about the system landscape that we are playing with here. If we take a look at this, since a couple of weeks ago just now, F&O moved into Power Platform, meaning that the LCS is no more. So both the F&O and the Power Platform capabilities exists within Power Platform. But I think it's important to remember then that the Power Platform, that is just the toolbox. It's not the actual tools. So this means that we still have a database for F&O and another database for Dataverse. Now, if we look a little bit back in the mirror, what happened before Copilot came was that all of the money was invested in low code, which was then all of the Power Platform capabilities, basically. The F&O module didn't really follow on in the same way during those days. So what Microsoft did was that they looked at this and said, okay, how can we utilize all of the effort that we have spent on Power Platform in F&O as well? And then they started inventing these things like virtual entities that would enable you to leverage all of the tools that has been built on the Power Platform on the F&O data as well. So you might have heard about dual writes before. Dual writes we will not talk about today because dual writes, that is copying data between Dataverse and F&O. Virtual entities, that's something else. That is kind of reading directly from the F&O database into Dataverse and then running the different applications on that. So we never actually store the data in Dataverse in the same sense as we would do with dual writes. Now, of course, the headless ERP has come really strong during the fall as well. So that's important to keep in mind. But to make the headless ERP really strong, that is to combine it together with virtual entities. So I think today we'll cover the basics of virtual entities, and I might do a second version on this together with the headless ERP later on as well. In the past, you would use the F&O connectors to do different stuff. And then you could use Power Automate and Power Apps Canvas apps towards F&O because they are leveraging the connectors, but stuff like model-driven apps or Power Pages you could not do towards F&O because they needed Dataverse in the backbone. Now, what Microsoft has done now is that they have more or less stopped developing on the F&O connectors and are pointing toward the Dataverse connectors for all of this instead, saying use the virtual entities to get the data entities from F&O out to Dataverse and then connect to the data from there. So that's kind of the theme of all of this. We use virtual entities and then we can leverage all of the capabilities of Dataverse as well. One thing that I think is really important when you're doing this is to understand the data entities as well, because we are not exposing the actual F&O tables as virtual entities in Dataverse. It is the data entities. Now, if you're coming from an F&O side, you are probably quite familiar with that. But if you're coming from the Power Platform side, you might not know so much about what is a data entity. I used to explain data entities like a good old classic database view. It can be flattened, several tables, like if we take the customer table, for example, it has a child table of contact information, a child table of address information, and a parent table of the party table. But then we have the customer V3 data entity where they have flattened all of these tables into one that you can communicate with. And it can receive data and you can get data out from it as well. Now, the important stuff with data entities is that all tables does not necessarily have a data entity. So there can be scenarios where there is no data entity. And without a data entity, you can't have it as a virtual table either. So then you need to go to your F&O developer who will need to code a new data entity for you. There can also be scenarios where all fields in the table does not exist in the data entity, and then you once again need to go to your F&O developer and ask them to add those fields into that data entity as well. Another important aspect of data entities is that they can be public or they can be private. It's only the public ones that are OData entities that can be virtual entities in the end as well. So you might have data entities that are only for DMF imports and so on that are not public, and then you can't use them as virtual tables. There is around 1,000 data entities, 400 of them are public, and the rest of them are only private. The majority of the useful tables are both public and private, so that means that you can use them anyhow, but they need to be public. So how do we know what data entities we have and which ones are public? Let's take a look on that. Once you're in your F&O system, you can simply go to System Administration and Data Management. From within here, you will find data entities. Now, I think this image gives you a good view of what data entities there are and what's available. One thing that you will struggle on later on during the process is the naming of data entities, because they have more or less three different names that we should take account of: for the entity name, the staging name, and the target name. The entity name, that's what the table will be called in the very end once it's created within Dataverse. But the target entity, that is the name that we will need to search for later on. What's important to remember while being in here as well is that this is only showing all non-public data entities. However, the majority, or at least half of the data entities, are both public and asynchronous. So half of them we will be able to use here. Another half might not exist because they are only private data entities when we try to enable them later on. So, but it's still very good to have this view due to the namings and so on. And the most of the useful data entities, they are actually here. But then you might ask yourself, okay, how do we know which ones we can actually use? Well, there's one way of finding out which data entities are available as public data entities, and that is going to your URL of your environment, and after the dash, you write data. And that will expose all of the public OData data entities that you later on can use. But we don't really have the same good view of the namings in here. That's why I would like to start in the other view and then maybe just use this view as a reference instead, because we don't have all of the three names in the same way as we had in the other place within here. Okay, so enough of the theory now. So what I would like to do now is to enable a virtual table for sales orders. So I go to the data entity to find an appropriate data entity for this. So I would go in here. I might search for sales order like this, see what I get. Go down here. Maybe this one, sales order header, might work. You can try out a couple of ones. You might ask your functional consultants as well to kind of help you with which one to use. Now, the name that we will need to search for when enabling this data entity, that is the target entity. So let's copy this for further references. What we will do then is to go into the Maker portal in Power Apps. Now, the Maker portal in Power Apps, that is kind of where we will be working, where you're doing the majority of your job in here. I think it's important to remember to take a look on what environment are you in. Are you in the same environment that's connected to the F&O? That's super important. Now, there is, if we go to tables here in the Maker portal, there is one very magical table called available finance and operations tables or entities. This one, it's called available finance and operations entities. So we click that, and that will list all of the available OData public data entities that there is that we can choose from. You can also see if they are enabled in the Dataverse environment or not by this visible part. You might want to press this little edit button here when you start working with it to kind of get a better view of all of this. So what we will do now is that we will search for the sales order data entity that we looked at before. Now, once again, this is the targeted entity field that we're searching for, so that's important. So I'll type that in that we used before. Let me go back here, copy that. There we go. And we can say, okay, here it is. But it's not visible. It means it's not created in Dataverse yet. Now, you might think that you can press this little tool, but that will not work. You will just get an error. So what you need to do is that you need to mark that table. You need to press edit row using form. Now, you would not have had that in the initial view that I was in. You need to press that edit button that I pressed initially to come here, and then you will get edit row using form. And then you can press that. Then you will come into this form, where you simply just press visible in here and press the save button. Now, this usually takes a little while because what it does is actually that it's creating a table within Dataverse and it's reading from the FNO data entities in here. Now, another important aspect once being in here is this little refresh button. Basically, what it does is that if you have developers adding new fields to the data entities, or if they are changing something in the data entity in the background in FNO, and you, of course, then want to have those fields or those changes to the virtual table in Dataverse as well, you need to refresh the virtual table. So what you do then is that you go press 2 times here so it becomes refresh and press save again, and then it will take a bit of an extra time to look through that and refresh your table as well. Now let's get over to make.powerapps.com again and the main page for it. So we will go to make.powerapps.com and we will jump into tables. We'll search for our sales order table. Important that you need to press this little all button, otherwise it usually always filters it out. Let's search for sales order. And we can then start taking a look here. Now, as I explained before, this name that the table actually got, that is not the targeted entity name that we were searching before. That is actually the entity name. So this is probably what the entity will be named. So let's take a look on that. Filter out by that. What do we have? Oh yeah, here we got it. Perfect. Let's take a look. So we'll click into that table. We can scroll down here and take a look at the data that it's providing. We might want to select a couple of columns that we would like to see. So let's press this little button here. We can add fields like status, and we might want to add shipping date as well, required shipping date. So let's add those two in there. Now, this is displaying all of the data just as you would see it within the data entity. And you can also do edits within here. So if I filter out, now you can't change the requested shipping date on an invoiced sales order, but if we filter it on an open order instead, so we get a couple of open orders in here, we can simply just go in here and do edits on this record. So I can change it to another date if I would like, and it saves it automatically. So this is a totally new way as well of working with your FNO data, that you can go in here and modify and work directly on the data in an editable grid as well. Now, given that we have this data now in FNO, we can start acting on it. We can build Power Apps, model-driven apps, Canvas apps, Power Pages, and Power Automates, for example. Okay, so let's do a quick live example of this. We'll go to Solutions, where I've created a small little FNO solution for us to work in, and I'll create a new model-driven app. So let's go to Apps, Model-driven apps. I'll call it Sales Order App. I'll create it. I will add the sales order table as a table to it. For header v2 we were using. So we will add that to it. We might want to add some columns that we think are appropriate for this. So let's take like status that we had before. We might want to add customer name, customer account, maybe what legal entity it's related to. And let's take the requested shipping date that we had before as well. Super. Looks good. We'll take save and publish. Well, might go back. And also do some edits to the form. And add things in here like maybe the connected city is interesting. Legal entity is obviously interesting. Oh, now we got something too much in here. We might want to use the status again. You might want to have different dates that we think are interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can start building these forms just as you would like as you go on. Just press save and publish once you're done with all of it. And then we'll just go back and play the app to see how it looks. We can see here that it has pulled out a lot of data from FNO. It's reading sales orders directly from within FNO. It's having the columns that we added before in our app. We can go in here and filter stuff if we would like. If we would like to only have things from one legal entity, for example, we can go in and filter on a specific legal entity where we would like to see specific sales order data from. We can add another one if we would like. And like that we can work with it. We can also go in and access the form that we built before to get some more detailed data about this. We are not doing any deep dive here today on either Power Apps, model-driven apps, Power Apps, Canvas apps, or Power Automate, but there's tons of good content in around it out there on the internet that has been provided by some brilliant people within the community. The majority of it is mainly connected towards standards Dataverse tables. So my hope is that you guys, after this session, will be able to take that content and understand how you now can do it on your FNO data as well. I also did create two exercises for you guys, one on model-driven apps, Canvas apps, and one on Power Automate. You can find them on my GitHub. It looks something like this. It's step-by-step instructions on how to do everything within it. So good luck with that if you're up for that. But with that said, this session is done, and I would like to thank you all guys for listening in. Take care.